Moving a 50,000 kilogram well servicing unit over highways, farm roads, and pastures takes knowledge, planning, skill, and a lot of common sense. One little slip, one moment's carelessness, and the rig could easily be involved in an accident or even a rollover. We can't give you hands-on training or common sense if you haven't already got it. But in the next few minutes, we will give you some solid tips based on experience that may well keep you from having a costly and foolish accident. We'll talk about some of the problems involved with roading a well servicing rig and how to avoid them. Along the way, we'll make three major points. Moving a rig takes preparation. It takes a driver who's intelligent and knows what he's doing. And during the move, you've got to watch everything, never letting your guard down even for a second. This is a mobile well servicing rig. It may look like a vehicle, but it's not. It's a huge piece of specialized oil field equipment that happens to have wheels under it so you can move it. It's not really designed for the road the way a car or truck is. But on the other hand, it's easy to move. Automatic transmission, power steering, air brakes. Practically anybody could climb into a rig and drive it down the road, and that's exactly why it is so easy to get into trouble with one of these. As any experienced hand will tell you, roading a rig is a lot more difficult than it looks. Rigs come in different sizes, of course, but this one is fairly typical. It's close to 20 meters long, and with the board and derrick laid over, it's just over 4 meters high. Depending on the rig, the laid-over derrick can hang out anywhere from 1 to 8 meters beyond the cab. Loaded up and ready to move, this rig weighs close to 50,000 kilograms. And here's where things really start to get interesting, because a large percentage of that 50,000 kilograms is above the midline of the rig. That means it's very top-heavy and can tip over much easier than any truck ever would. Let's say you had a rig and a pickup truck side by side, and you tilted each one. When we start tilting the pickup, it doesn't become unstable until it reaches a fairly steep angle. That's because most of the weight is in the bottom half of the truck. But watch what happens if we start tipping the rig. It starts going over almost immediately because so much of its weight is up high. Put it this way, if one side of this rig is 10 to 15 centimeters lower than the other, the rig is in danger of rolling over. A quick look at some real-life accident reports gives you an idea of just how easy it is to lay a rig on its side. The first thing in roading a rig is preparation, and that includes deciding who will do the driving. Usually it's the rig manager, operator, or an approved driver with plenty of experience in the field who understands the special hazards of roading a rig. Of course, your own company policies will affect the decision of who does the driving. The driver has to comply with full provincial regulations or have a service rig contractor exemption, plus an air brake endorsement. These usually apply when you take a rig onto public roads. These vary depending on your location. No matter how short the distance to be covered, the trip has to be carefully planned. And whether you're moving across a pasture or across 500 kilometers of highway, the first step in planning is to figure out the best route to take. Your office should provide accurate directions to the next location. Then at least one crew member who knows what to look for should drive the lease road beforehand in a pickup, looking for anything that might cause trouble during the rig move. The crew member looks for load-zoned bridges and roads. Power lines, especially when you get onto private property. Telephone and power lines may be lower than normal. If there's any question whether the rig will fit under a line, call your supervisor. Never try to touch or move a power line yourself. Don't even try to gauge how high it is. And do not ease a rig forward to the point where the overhang comes close to the line. In certain cases, an electric arc can jump to the rig even if the derrick isn't touching the line. When there's the slightest doubt, call your supervisor. Cattle guards are another potential hazard. Before crossing, check to see if the cattle guard has been damaged in any way. Also, make sure your approach is straight enough so you don't clip the sides of the guard. Tin horn and concrete culverts. The rig driver will usually be turning into a gate, and it's very easy for the rear wheels of the rig to go too near the edge and collapse the end of the culvert. If that happens, the rig can tip, but more likely it will simply get stuck and have to be winched out. By the way, if a rig ever does get stuck in a hole or ditch or mud or sand, don't try to work your way out using the rig's power. It doesn't have that kind of power, and you will cause major damage to the drivetrain and rear end. That means downtime and lost wages while repairs are being made. When a rig gets stuck, you should call your supervisor. Watch for sharp turns and narrow roads. It is very easy to tip a rig during a sharp turn, even at low speeds, if the wheels on one side leave the road. Watch for low clearance underpasses, and keep in mind that posted clearances are often wrong. If the road has been resurfaced, the clearance may actually be quite a bit less than what the sign says. Don't guess at clearances or the height of the rig. Measure to be sure. You must have no doubt whatsoever about the height of the rig you drive. Make a note of construction zones and congested areas. Make sure you have all the permits you need to legally move the rig. Local ordinances may restrict roading to certain hours or certain routes. Remember that when turning at an intersection, you'll be creating a hazard by taking up 4 lanes at once. Motorists may become impatient. You may need someone to flag, to help direct traffic and guide the turns. All this should be taken into account during the planning of the route. What shape is the road in? Is it asphalt, gravel, dirt? You will have to keep speeds especially low on gravel or dirt roads and constantly watch for hazards. How about the highways? How many lanes and what kind of traffic load do you have to contend with? Is there a sloping shoulder, any place to pull off safely if you had to? What's the weather like? Bad weather may restrict the movement of the rig, and if it's been raining lately, you're bound to run into soft spots somewhere along the way. These are just some of the hazards that you can run into during a rig move. Never move a rig without doing a pre-trip inspection first. This is a CAODC inspection form consistent with the requirements of the Commercial Vehicle Inspection Program. The pre-trip inspection should always include lubrication and fuel levels, a pressure check and test of the air brakes, a check of the rig's flashers and lights. Make sure everything on the rig is tied down securely. A rig bounces around more than any other vehicle would, and anything that isn't secured can easily fall off, possibly on a public road where somebody could hit it and get hurt. Double check to see that the tubing board and rod basket are folded all the way down. If they're not, you'll have to take the extra height into account when you calculate your overhead clearances. Before you climb into the cab, clean it out. Clear out any cans, soft drink bottles, tools, or trash that might have been left in the cab while the rig was in place. There have been quite a few cases where objects have rolled around a cab floor during a trip and eventually gotten caught behind the brake pedal, causing an accident. Also inspect the crew truck and the doghouse. If anything needs attention, now's the time to find out. Now that you've planned the trip, scouted the route, and inspected the rig and the crew cab and utility trailer, you're ready to move out. By the way, rigs are not designed to carry passengers, and you must never try to carry any. When moving a rig onto a highway, allow plenty of time to ease it into the selected lane of traffic. Have someone flag traffic if you have to, but don't rush things. There's a real danger that the rig may swing off the other side of the highway and tip over. During this and every other turn you make, the rig's huge turning radius becomes painfully obvious. If we go back to our comparison between a rig and a typical pickup truck, you can easily see that any turn is going to require lots of planning and care. Different companies have different policies about where the crew truck should be during rig roading. Some like to have the truck in front of the rig to look ahead for problems. Others prefer to have it follow the rig. Either way, the most important thing is to keep the truck with the rig. Never leave the rig driver by himself during a move. And secondly, to make passing safer for motorists, leave enough distance between the truck and the rig so that a car can pass one of them at a time. Again, government regulations and policies vary where rig roading is concerned. Be familiar with those that apply in your area. On wide, straight highways, rig drivers sometimes are tempted to pick up speed. It is dangerous to do so. Anything over 70 kilometers per hour is very dangerous for two reasons. One, as its speed increases on the highway, a rig begins to bounce, making it harder to control. And secondly, the tremendous weight of a rig makes it very difficult to stop once it reaches a certain speed. Even at 70 kilometers an hour with full brakes applied, a 50,000 kilogram rig requires a great distance to stop. This is especially important in country with downhill stretches. The rig's speed can overrun the governor, with the rig ending up out of control. For this reason, you should choose a gear low enough to both pull the rig uphill and control its speed downhill. Engine speed should stay in the range of 2,000 to 2,500 RPM. During the trip, special hazards to look for include upgrades, where your speed will naturally drop. Traffic may stack up behind you, and motorists will want to pass. It may be courteous to pull over, but it is also extremely dangerous, so don't do it. If your right wheels drop off the edge of the pavement, even 10 to 15 centimeters, forces take over that can turn the rig over. Never move off to the right unless the surface is wide enough, flat enough, and solid enough to accommodate the entire rig. That includes emergency stops, such as flat tires, cool downs, or breakdowns. It even includes cases where a law enforcement officer tells you to pull off the road. If there is no safe place to pull off, politely refuse and explain why you can't pull off. Then give the officer a telephone number for your office. During an emergency stop, keep in mind that just because the rig is upright for now doesn't mean it will stay that way. If the ground is soft or uneven, a rig can tip over hours later, even though it seemed stable to begin with. And try to avoid parking on an incline. Wherever you park the rig, chock the wheels as an extra safety measure. And remember to place safety triangles following all applicable regulations. Sharp curves and narrow roads present special hazards. You'll have to drive very slowly, being extremely careful to stay on the road. If at some point you should feel the rig leaving the road, do not try to steer it back onto the road surface. If at all possible, stop the rig right where it is. Many turnovers occur when a driver tries to bring a unit back onto the road. Don't try to correct. Call your supervisor. Railroad crossings present special problems for reasons related to the size of the rig and the way it is built. You must come to a complete stop at every railroad crossing. But as you do, remember the overhang of the front of the rig. The safest thing to do is to stop well back of the crossing and ease forward very slowly. Some serious accidents have happened because a rig driver pulled too far forward and didn't realize his overhang extended over the railroad tracks. If you are too far forward, it's very difficult to back up safely because of visibility problems. Use a low gear when crossing the tracks, and do not change gears until you are well past the crossing. Careful advanced planning is crucial where rail crossings are concerned. If the rise is higher than the clearance under the rig will high center with its belly on the tracks. And even if the engineer of an oncoming train sees the rig stuck on the tracks, he won't be able to stop in time. Yes, it has happened. A crucial point in the trip occurs when the rig leaves the main road and turns onto a secondary road. Statistics show that more accidents happen and more damage is done at this stage than at any other point during rig roading. Long before the rig arrives, someone should walk around the site to look for hidden flow lines, valves, and soft spots in the ground. A spotter helps guide the rig into place. Never back a rig without a spotter. It's difficult enough even with a spotter. Cases have occurred in which the rig driver was backing up just a little too fast on a slick surface and didn't realize how hard it is to stop the rig. When he applied the brakes, the wheels locked up and the rig just kept sliding right back into the wellhead. Once the rig is in position, with the wheels chocked, and the crew begins rigging it up, it is important to do a post-trip inspection of the well servicing unit. Look for flats, loose wires, oil leaks, or anything that might have come undone during the trip. If you see something wrong, report it promptly. One more thing about these well servicing rigs. People who work in the oil patch are tough and strong, and they're used to working with rugged tools that can take abuse. But in spite of the fact that these rigs weigh 50,000 kilograms and are bigger than anything else on the road, their drive gear is much more delicate than it appears. The engine, transmission, and rear end on this rig can't take the kind of pounding that other equipment can. Keep that in mind, and you'll go a long way toward keeping your rig working. Whenever you load a rig, remember how many hazards you have to deal with. You can't afford to take any chances. The driver's attitude makes a huge difference. If you're tired or agitated or in a hurry, don't drive the rig at all. Let someone else do it, and make absolutely sure it's someone who knows what he's doing. The public depends on us to operate safely and responsibly, and we can't let them down. When it's time to load a rig, check the rig, check the route, drive with extreme care, and work as a team. Have a safe trip.